Good afternoon. Welcome to the January 18th session of the Cape Cod Regional Government Assembly of Delegates. I'd like to call this meeting to order, and we will begin with a moment of silence to honor our troops who have died in service to our country and all those serving our country in the armed forces. Okay, we'll now stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Before we continue our meeting, is anyone recording this besides? Yes, so this meeting is being recorded by others besides our normal contingent. Okay, the clerk will now call the roll. Intelligent.
Richard Anderson.
Present.
Cheryl Andrews.
Here.
Ronald Bergstrom.
Here.
Leo Kukunis.
Here.
Christopher Kanega.
Here.
James Killian.
Here.
Marcia King.
Here.
Thomas Lynch.
Here.
Teresa Martin.
Here.
Deborah McCutcheon. Here. Spiro Mitrokostas.
Here.
John Ullman.
Here.
Paul Pilcher.
Here.
Anthony Scalise. Julia Taylor.
Here.
Mr. Speaker, we have a quorum present with 95.45% of the delegates present, 4.55% absent.
Thank you. Okay, we'll now need a motion to approve the calendar of business.
Motion to approve the calendar of business.
Okay, second? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Come on, wake up.
Opposed? Okay, we got to move this along, guys. Here. We need approval of the Journal of January 4th, 2012.
Motion to approve the Journal of January 4th.
Okay, no addition. There are no additions or corrections. Hearing none, we'll now take a vote. All those in favor of approving the Journal say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, it's approved. We now have communication from the Board of Regional Commissioners, including on our agenda report on current year revenue. We also received a proposed ordinance from the commissioners.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am here since Pat Flynn has the flu and Bill Doherty is...
For those recording, this is Commissioner Sheila Lyons.
Yes, and I am Commissioner Sheila Lyons, who is filling in and pinch hitting for everyone else. I have submitted to you an ordinance that is a transfer of appropriations from the capital fund to continue the building and restoration, renovation of the health lab here up on the hill. It looks like a hefty sum, but it's already been appropriated in many ways in the capital fund for this purpose. We're accessing it. We could do it now. We could do it next fiscal year. In having the conversation with the health department and the buildings facilities departments, it just seemed more economical to continue on with the work that's in progress instead of holding it up and having to resubmit forms and probably maybe be hit with higher fees going forward. So we request that you take a look at that and approve it. I do know that on your agenda today it has a discussion about revenues. I was speaking to Mark, and I believe he and Jan had a conversation that he was not going to be able to be here today. And I think that I would much rather have him here to answer those questions that you may have. I know that Marcia, Spiro, several delegates were in our revenue hearing last week, so I'm sure they'll have lots to report on that. But I do think that there is a real effort to make sure that we all agree on what revenues are coming in and how we then proceed with the budget there.
The only reason that was the reason that was put on the agenda is because your chairman came to us 2 weeks ago and said that she would be able to give us that. That's why.
Well, I can't speak for her, but it is the treasurer who you need to have here to answer those questions, and he was unable to do it. But he will be here, I think, in the next session, 2 weeks from now. So write down all your questions as you're having that discussion, and remember, you don't have all the answers as you're deliberating. But you know, I do believe that, and it's good to have members of the delegation here at our hearings, because you do you get a sense of what we're hearing, how we're trying to decide our priorities going forward. We are looking at a shortfall, so we have to, and we have many things that we have to, there's many initiatives going forward, and it really is those investments into the future. So we have to prioritize as to what do we currently have to pay for, definitely, and where can we prioritize those efficiencies in the future and go forward from there. So you'll be hearing lots on that. But we did hear from the cooperative today. Bill Clark was in, who's doing great work all around the Cape. Everywhere I go on the Cape, everyone knows Bill Clark, I will say that. And they don't always know he's with us, but they all know Bill Clark. And our Human Service Department met with us today, as did the Registry of Deeds, but he did not talk about projections, he just talked about his own budget and how they're streamlining. So there's really, I don't have even kernels there to submit of that discussion. But he will be back to talk about projected revenues, and I'm sure he'll be here before you to talk about those same revenues. Maybe you can get him in here when Mark is here, and you can have them together. You might want to send him that invitation.
Are there any questions for the Commissioner Lyons? Commissioner Lyons, I guess what we're looking for is the difference between what you had projected in the budget for this year as of January 1st and what as for revenues and what the Registry of Deeds actually coughed up. So it's just a number.
It really is the number, and
You must have that number. It's hiding somewhere.
Well, it's not with me, and so I'm not going to put out a number, and I don't want to be, giving you a roundabout and then have it, so many hundreds of thousands of dollars off. However, there's the number of the Registry of Deeds, which is the third of our budget, and that's what you have to remember. There are lots of other revenue streams that are coming in and offset different costs, and that we're able to use in that way. So it's not always as dire as it appears if you're just going by the registry. Again, I do think that Mark can answer those questions in more detail as to how that all balanced out, and how we're looking at that going into the next year.
You have the answer.
Mr. Speaker, this is part of what you gave us on Wednesday. It has that, the Registry of Deeds, we've only collected 43% as of January. They had subjected to collect a total of $7,450,000. Right now we've collected $3,200,820. And then the other piece of the registry, which are the fees, we're down at 41% that they've collected as of January.
Mm-hmm.
Is that the projection made by the registry, what they would collect, or is that what?
No, this is actual.
No, those were the actual numbers for the first 6 months of fiscal year.
First 6 months of the fiscal year, the deeds tax is only brought in 43% instead of 50%, and the deed fees have brought in 41.6%.
Right.
46 of what?
Of 50%
Of the total that we projected for this fiscal year.
We meaning the county.
the county.
Yes.
Not Jack Mead, because his number is different there.
Right, his numbers are different, and that is what we have also, we did discuss that with Jack to make sure that we are lining up our numbers correctly as we go into these hearings, that we don't want to have our numbers and his numbers, we want to have the same number.
I think the chairman of the Finance Committee also has these numbers, but I mean, I just wanted to make sure that we were getting it. So.
And those were as of January. Those numbers are different today, and they could have a different variable of difference.
Okay, John, did you?
I just want you to know I'm going to meet with Mark Selinsky next week one-on-one, and I would encourage anybody on the Assembly that wants a specific or many specific questions answered to email me or go through Janice and make sure that we all know we're on the same page. But I intend to start meeting with him regularly for the next 6 months, making sure that we can come as close as we can to balancing this FY 212 budget. So please send them along.
Okay. Anything else? Thank you very much.
Well, thank you for having me. All right, good to see all of you.
We now have communications from the IT Director, John Morse, regarding county email accounts. Mr. Morse. You want to give us an introduction as to what this is all about? I mean, I know what it's about, but... Green light on?
Bingo, thank you. Yeah, really. We'll do a little better on this presentation, I promise. Good afternoon, I'm John Morse, Director of IT for Barnstable County. This is an outgrowth of a discussion that we actually had during the county's IT budget hearing, Finance Committee last February, March, whenever that was, where we discussed the communications, how you folks communicate, and the possibility of setting up Barnstable County email addresses for the members of the Assembly of Delegates. And that was something that we discussed the merits of pursuing. We have been working on that since then, and that is something that we do want to provide to you. We want to provide those email accounts to you basically for two purposes. One, we want to help protect you, basically, in the event that there are, in the future, and of course we know this would never happen, but any sort of legal action where somebody wanted to audit your email communications, that the way it is working now, you folks are using either personal email accounts or email accounts from another business opportunity that is also a professional responsibility of yours. And what we're looking to do is have official Assembly Delegates business kind of using Barnstable County email accounts. And then there would be one place where all of these communications would take place. As well, of course, we're trying to protect the county and the security of these communications by providing the infrastructure that we have kind of control over the security of those things as well. So that's, I mean, it basically is a security-related issue to protect you and to protect the county is why we want to propose doing this. So I was going to come here to tell you this is something we're pursuing doing. We are just about ready to take questions from you and then take a minute to kind of outline the process moving forward if we're going to go ahead and do this. So I guess I would ask before I talk about process if there are any other questions about what I've just presented.
I'm really backwoods on this kind of stuff, so if we get a email address from the county, alcocunis@assembly.barnstable, can that be directed to my current email so that I don't have to go to a separate place and continue to open it? I know I get one from the state through the Farm Bureau, and that's the way they do it.
Yeah, I believe we have that option. Depending upon how you access it, it may or may not be as flexible as what you need it to be. What we were going to propose was simple web-based access to your email account. So no matter where you were, assuming of course it's a secure location, you could hit basically a web page and get access to all those emails, and they would be separate. There is the possibility of doing email forwarding. If you do email forwarding and it comes into an email program, say Microsoft Outlook, that you use multiple accounts on, then you have, if you're responding, you have to be careful and be able to manage the sender on those things. And so it's certainly something we can discuss, you know, but we want to be careful that that all gets managed appropriately.
So just, I find this would be a separate account. Like, let's say I go into my computer, would it be a different user? In other words, would I be Ron Bergstrom at this and then Ron Bergstrom at that?
Since it's in essence, think of using the an interface in your web browser to do it. And so yes, it's a separate account, but you don't have to worry about the management of that account if all you do is access it over the internet via a secure connection from a web browser.
Yeah.
I do think, and I'm reluctant to have to go to another account. I mean, there are irritations about that, but I do think that it would be a service to the public that they would know that there was the name at, and it was always Barnstable, whatever it is, and that would be a lot easier for people to remember and feel, oh yeah, I know I can get hold of my person. And it might even be that the address ought to be Falmouth at something or Mashpee at something, as opposed to their even having to know the person's name. That's another way that it would make it easier for the public.
And we have the possibility to discuss with Janice doing multiple things along those lines within the one account, so that if, one of you, let's just say, retires, and then before we get to publish who the next representative or the next elected representative is from that town, something like, Yarmouth Assembly member at barnstablecounty.org would still resolve to somewhere where it could be read. So there are things we can discuss and work to kind of cover those eventualities as well.
What do we, I get a lot of county-related email. I get very few from other people, because normally we go through Janice, I do get a few. Most of them I get are from the public saying, we heard you say this, and they email me on my personal account. Is that going to remain the same pretty much, or are we going to try to push them toward the...
We would publicize on Janice's part of barnstablecounty.org the new Barnstable County email addresses. So we would encourage the public, if they were going to contact you, to use your county email address, yeah. And then that would basically, be the record of your public interaction.
As it stands now, an email between myself and somebody else on county, if I emailed Dick over here and I said, geez, maybe we should discuss this at the next meeting, that's public, it's a public document?
Yeah, that's subject to discovery.
That's why we want to keep it, rather than have to go through every email I get from Sierra.com and whatever, they'll have it.
And I would assume, should somebody ever have to do a discovery, that's the way you would prefer to have it as well.
I know you're trying to be as accommodating as possible, but are you not attempting to standardize email format for Barnstable County so that it all starts to look the same, except for obviously the recipient's name?
Yes, basically, so that they are all at barnstablecounty.org, and so that the accounts are all set up, say, as Metricostas at barnstablecounty.org, yes.
Okay.
But we can set up another standard too, for the accessibility of the public that might be, Town of Yarmouth Assembly member, whatever, that standard would be. We could set that up as well. So we can set up multiple standards, not to confuse the public, but to cover in the possibility that there's a vacancy or something.
Thanks.
Yes, Cheryl.
Since we're all kind of weighing in and giving you some feedback, I'll do it now as opposed to writing to Jan later, and just say that when you do this, this will be maybe the 4th or 5th time I've had an account like this, and all the other ones I've ever been part of left it up to the recipient whether or not they wanted to go web-based versus bring it into their Gmail account or whatever. So I would encourage you to do it that way. That way each delegate can do whatever they find is easiest. And then the second thing is, I hope you don't go Mashpee at Barnstable, whatever. It should be obvious to whoever is sending the email and looking it up later who the recipient was. So my experience with this is it's always the name, and then when the selectman retires, it gets a new name, or the town worker is leaving the employee, it gets a new name. So I hope you just stick with it like every other town and do it name-based.
All right.
Thank you.
Teresa, did you want to say something?
I was just going to say you can do it either way, and people can forward stuff any which way, so that's all doable. I actually agree with Julia that it would actually be kind of nice if they were consistent emails by the position, so that no matter who was in there, there'd be a record of it. Because when I do things, if I'm wearing a positional hat, it's different than if you're sending it to me, whether it's a Barnstable County address or whatever address. So if I'm going to have this account and it's going to be separate, it makes it easy for everybody to be able to find who they're reaching out to. You don't have to have, there were embarrassing, really old emails on our public website for a long time because no one remembered to go in and update them. And this way you never have to worry about that, and people learn what it is, and it is what it is. And it's something like, Eastham AOD. So it's obvious what it is, no matter who it is. And I know there's people out there that don't know who any of us are, but might want to reach out to us. So I think we ought to give them as much a chance as we can.
Okay. Well, maybe you should continue on your...
Good questions, though. So basically what we're looking at going forward is, Janice and I had discussed, I would send an email to your present account, which would basically set forth the process and the introduction of this. It would give you what your account information is going to be, and it would give you instructions for being able to connect to the web interface. And then we will pick a date, which probably around February 1st, I think, is where we might want to start this. Again, as opposed to waiting a little longer and being in the middle of the budget hearings and trying to start something then, which might be a little problematic. And then, probably provide a more informal Q&A if any of you need it once we get started. The one piece that we want to work on with Janice is just we want to find a secure way for sharing the initial password with all of you and giving you the opportunity to change that. So the instructions about how we're going to exchange passwords will also be in that email too. So we'll propose to your current email addresses sending an email that's the basic introduction of the process, and then we should be able to take things from there.
Leo?
I didn't realize you were going to start this up so quickly. So do you think that forwarding situation will be available when this thing starts moving forward? And I understand that if it's forwarded to my regular account, that if I'm going to respond, which normally I usually don't respond to emails, personally I don't, because people usually are sending me information for me to read. So it's not one that I would respond to. I know that, again, with Mass Farm Bureau, they forward it to my account, and if I feel compelled to contact that person, then I go to the Mass Farm Bureau account and contact that person. But yeah. I was just wondering, because I'm not sure if I want to take the time to go looking for all this information we're going to be getting.
Yeah. I think the forwarding is, if we choose to do forwarding, that's a relatively easy setup, so I think we can have that readily available by that period in time.
Okay, so, I mean, I'm not quite a Luddite, but I'm late to the computer age, and so if somebody will go onto the Barnstable County website and they want to email me, they will look me up on the Barnstable County website, and I'll be there, Ron Bergstrom at barnstablecounty.org.
That's correct.
And they will email me, off I'll go. Now, if I want to get that information will show, all right, that's how they get it. Now, where does it show up on my end?
Right. You can visit the website that we'll give you at any period in time. If we do the forwarding, that would also serve as kind of like an alert to you that you have an email, basically. You'd be able to read it, and you might want to, like you say, just hit barnstablecounty.org, our website, in order to respond to that.
So I would hit barnstablecounty.org, and that would be, I would just get the email sent to me?
Yeah.
Okay. That's what yeah, Janice, did you?
Is this similar to, for example, I go to a workshop, I'm away from my desk, I want to access my email. This is pretty much how I'm set up. Okay, good. I just want to put everyone at ease that it's not that bad because I did it. And they helped me, and it's not going to be that bad. It sounds a little scary, but it's not, and it works slick. It's really easy, so.
And the IT department will support you, just like we support the county commissioners, the county staff, and anybody else who has county email accounts that we provide. So,
as long as it has a delete option and a junk mail option, I'll be happy with it. Yeah, Leo.
Just one more question, because I heard two comments, or actually three. Who's going to make the determination whether it's going to be El Cacunas at Assembly of Delegates .barnstable.org or Howard's rep at Assembly of Delegates?
Sometime after this meeting, Janice and I will confer about all of this, and then we will request any additional clarification or opinion from the speaker, and we'll kind of come up with a decision. And yeah, I think for the most part, yeah.
As long as it's not Cranberry Pig at barnstablecounty.org.
I have a question for you.
Yeah, Dick?
Thanks, Mr. Speaker. Are we going to be able to self-control the filters?
Good question. I don't think so.
Right,
it's been a while since I've.
All right, I'm just thinking, like, you got this one person out there that continually gives you more and more and more and more and more and more. Pretty soon you're using a ream of paper to print it out so you can store it without using up your, so
Well-
is there a way for us to filter something like that?
Well,
Or do you handle the filter?
Well, do remember, I mean, you wouldn't necessarily, I mean, it now would be a county email account. So by the fact that we accepted the email, it's on our server. So therefore, as part of the public record, it's preserved from that point on. So you wouldn't necessarily have to print it out to preserve public record right there.
I'm not saying, if I may.
Go ahead.
I'm not saying that I want to print it out. I'm just saying I don't even want to look at it.
Right.
I don't even want to get it.
And I think the problem with having users control the filters then is that, again, some potential real public communication. This goes across the board, and I'm sure if you folks think of the county staff, you can envision this a lot better. Somebody could filter out something that is in fact an essential communication, So that's basically why we kind of try to centralize those filtering things.
I think that, I mean, I don't know what the obligations of us as public officials are, but I think that we're supposedly be able to accept public comment whether we want to or not, And what we do with it after that is pretty much, but I don't think we can basically blacklist anybody. Maybe we can, but I don't know if we can or not.
And we will keep we won't promise to keep all the spam out of the accounts, but we'll keep the same level of spam that we keep out of the other 250 accounts that we manage.
Just so I know, I mean, I understand there's no expectation of privacy in these accounts. Who has access to the email in these accounts?
Just the Barnstable County IT department until or unless the public authorities, police or whatever, make a formal request.
But isn't a lot of it public record?
Yeah, I mean, if there's a public records request, then we will comply.
Okay.
Yep.
That's all I wanted to know.
Okay, all right, sorry. I misinterpreted your question.
Do you have a question?
Yeah, I think from my standpoint, this is a great idea because it separates privileged information from non-privileged information for me, so that's a good thing. Furthering on the question of control, I'm assuming there'll be folders and things where you can send stuff from particular senders or relating to a particular subject. So in essence, you can automatically control the question that's been raised about where stuff goes, relating to a particular subject or a particular sender. So to me, that's great.
I mean, essentially that's correct. I think right now, because we're using a version of the program that's a few years old, you may not have all of the features to automatically say, take all communications from John Morris at barnstablecounty.org and direct them to a folder never read. But, over the next year, we'll also be upgrading the technology, and you'll have better, to kind of automate some of that filtering, you'll have better options as well. But there is, definitely.
That wasn't what I meant.
Exactly. But you will be able to manage folders and kind of store all those email communications in any folder structure that you want.
First of all, what do you need from us right now? Do you need anything, or this is in progress and you're?
Yeah. This is in process. Wanted to present it before we do it. It does sound like everybody pretty much is like, okay, email instructions is probably going to be something we're going to be able to handle to introduce this. And what it probably will do is informally, before your next meeting, we'll be around either for Q&A on this or maybe to talk about passwords. Janice and I will work out the particulars on that.
Okay, so the next time, pretty soon when we get our agenda and we get our information, instead of having our individual emails, it'll be Ron Bergstrom at Barnstable County, Dick Anderson at Barnstable County, so on and so forth, all the way down the line.
Yep.
RB from, yeah. Cranberry Pig, I don't know if we're going to put that in there. Yes, Janice.
Yeah, again, it's going to be pretty simple. You're going to have that nice little icon or that tab for your page. You're going to click on that. You're going to put your password in, and your email will come up. You'll be able to access everything you need. But I want to emphasize that consistency is going to be very important with regards to email addresses. And I understand what Julie's saying. It could be something as simple as J. Taylor for Falmouth at, so that you're getting the name of the person, you're getting their location kind of as one piece. But I think there's got to be some consistency with regards to what we're going to use, name, location, and then the tagline.
And another issue that is personal to me is that sometimes I don't check my email, for a day or two. And sometimes because I forget, sometimes just because, and
That's allowed.
that's allowed. But I mean, the thing is, if I'm getting a lot of different stuff from a lot of different people, I'm more likely to check it, to say, hey, what's going on? Whereas on the county email, where there may be days go by that there's nothing, you have to make an effort to check it. You have to go say, well, so now I'm going to have to remind myself to check that rather than do anything. But maybe it's not heavy lifting, but.
And I see that's probably part of the reason why Leo suggested the forwarding as well, because that would kind of alleviate that. You would know when something comes in.
Yeah, in other words, send me a message. I don't even have to open it in my regular email. It just has to be a notification that I have an email if that's possible. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. Not very good. Yep.
Would you suggest that, someone was mentioning folders, I happen to have a regular Comcast.net email account, and I have created a folder for the assembly. Would you suggest that at some time, once this is up and running, that I transfer all those emails to my new Barnstable County folder account, so that they're there?
Hadn't been something I'd thought about up until now. I hadn't worried about the past. I'll think about that, and I'll try to address it.
Is it something that will be able to be done simply?
Yeah. I'll think about it, and I will address it when we do come out with the instructions.
Okay. Well, I guess we're done until we hear from you.
Yep.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Okay. The next item on our agenda is communications from public officials, communications from members of the public. Okay, we've now convened the assembly, and we'll start with reports of committees. The Special Commission on County Governance, I think, met right after our last meeting? Yes. Julie, do you want to give us a...
I have some thoughts, and you can add, and maybe, was anyone else there? Well...
John was there.
Yeah, that's right. I've had mixed feelings about serving on this. I've been glad to be there for you and for the county, but I wasn't positive that we were going to have a good result. I was a little more excited after the last meeting because I really felt there was a commitment by the leaders of the commission and by the members that were there to really thinking seriously about what additional things would be useful for the county to do. And that wasn't just sort of a preliminary to the big business, which was let's revamp the structure. I think that that's going to be a topic that's going to come up, but I'm now thinking there's actually some appetite for taking on projects and duties and restructuring the county in terms of its mission and what it does. I also did finally say near the end of that meeting, are we going to talk about the money, and is there any chance that we could have a change in revenue streams, because I think we're wasting our time if people are going to take a firm stand that, no new taxes. I'm not advocating any new tax, but I just was interested in whether this commission had any willingness to entertain that topic, and I think it does, and it was certainly open to that, to new revenues as a possibility if needed for new activities. I don't think there's really any big new activity that we could undertake that wouldn't require some sort of startup money. One of the main things discussed at the last meeting was the RUS. Remember, that's the regional umbrella for, what, software services, where the new Open Cape would have these, the concept that the county would organize software services to the towns. The people on the committee, the commission from the towns, such as the town managers, are very, very interested in this, and they definitely want the county to do it. But this is going to require hiring some sort of relatively highly trained, expensive person. It's going to, or consultant, or I see an outlay of some money. Eventually, once it got going, the towns could be charged for this service and it would pay for itself, and the towns would be getting such a fabulous deal, they'd be happy to pay the modest amounts to make it come out even for the county. But it requires some sort of investment. I was so taken by the whole thing that I think it should be, some money should be in this year's budget. Now, I know there's no money, we have problems, but that was how I saw it. All right, so quite excited about the concept of really taking on some needed services on the part of the county for the region and its towns. On the other hand, that made me worry that if we do come up with thoughts about a new structure that might better serve these new activities, I'd hate to see a couple of years of, well, I won't say fighting, but perhaps disagreements about a new structure, and if there were disagreements, I think it would be very hard to get it passed. It would require a charter change, and it would. So I'm now getting excited about the new missions. So I really would be very hesitant to get us bogged down in a lot of structure change. And I really hadn't thought of it. This just sort of came to me as I'm driving home with Vicki Lowell, and gee, there's maybe some exciting things ahead that really could happen. And what if we have a lot of fight about the commissioners and the assembly? And I thought, that's a couple of years of work and energy by the political people involved that's taking away from maybe going forward with some of these other things. So that was my thought at the end.
I heard the same thing that Julia heard, and as far as the startup cost for the RUS, I brought that up. I said, well, we're going to need two. There's two responsibilities. One is for I want to call it the capital cost for setting this up and how it's going to be done and so on. And then down the line, once that's settled, there's going to be the ongoing cost. But everybody looked at me like I didn't know what I was talking about, and of course I don't. So I stopped and backed off. But there has to be, and then he said, "Well, we'll take care of that."
The capital cost is going to be taken care of.
Yeah.
So then it's two other costs. One, getting it organized by the county.
Yes,
that's where our cost would come. Then there's the ongoing costs of running the services, but that's not a problem because that can be charged to the users, and they will be getting a good deal, and they'll be happy to pay those. Okay, so it's really just the startup operational costs and organizing the whole system that the county might have to take on.
We've already contributed in kind by providing them with a locus.
But that's all for what we could loosely refer to as capital costs. That's done. Now, what person is going to draw up an RFP? What person is then going to judge that? And who is going to actually coordinate these software needs of the towns?
Yeah,
that's going to take a very high-priced person, I think.
Open Cape was intimating that they were going to be part of that. I mean,
They will give us some advice, and their branch, what's their profit branch?
the contract?
Cape Net or whatever it's called. They'll all do their parts, but they'll be paid to do that by the towns eventually. But someone has to organize it, and it should be the county, in my view. I have no doubt about that. But there's no person now working for the county who could do that. And they would have to be hired either as a person, as a consulting thing, somehow.
All right, in the regards to the county tax, although I didn't call it that, or the increase in the assessments, they brought up the example of the dispatch, and they said if indeed this regionalization of a certain service could save the towns a lot of money, they're more than willing to pay us some of that in order to cover the expenses. So the additional revenue was not necessarily going to be an additional expense to the town. It was going to be an offset for a savings. But then they brought up matters like wastewater, which are huge, and so whether or not, and that, of course, went nowhere. But they did look into and Mary Pat at that point, finally got up and said, this is the first time I heard it, she said, we're running a deficit. We're going to have to reassess our needs for the next half of the year, and she said it doesn't look good for next year either. This was during our discussion about additional revenues. So that's pretty much where it went. The Bob Lawton, who is the former town manager in Yarmouth, and also Bud Dunham, I think, are on the special committee. And they have been preparing a report from a town manager's perspective as to the organizational structure of the county government. And I don't know what it is because they haven't presented it, but you can pretty much guess that it's going to be more about the administrative functions rather than the political divisions. They're looking at how the administrator, assistant administrator, and so on. So they intend to. They've got it almost finalized. It was supposed to be presented today. Unfortunately, the meeting had to be canceled because of the intervening holiday, we didn't get the requisite 48 hours notice. It has to be business days. So fortunately, I don't have to stay here till 9:30, and neither does Julie. So anyway, that's it. You want to add anything, John? Did you hear anything that we missed? Or?
No, I was just very grateful that Julie did come up with the option of, if you're going to change county government significantly, that there has to be a new revenue stream. Right. I was very glad that they were coming up with alternative ideas on taxing the people of Cape Cod as opposed to someone like us. I think if these wonderful ideas are going to come to fruition, that revenue stream is going to have to increase, and I'm glad that they are taking that obligation on, and I hope that you continue to put that kind of pressure on them.
One other point is, I do think now, galvanized by that meeting last week, I do think we have to think very seriously about this upcoming budget, and do we want to do, before this budget is passed in May, say, there's going to be this report well finished to the commissioners, and it's going to be pretty strong in terms of, I think, in terms of some changes that might be good for what the county does for the services and mission. So I think we really need to be alert to this before we review the budget. And I'm not sure that the commissioners are thinking along those lines. Especially, I'm sure they're worried about just, how are we going to pay for what we've got, with the shortfall. So we need to think about this. Okay. Maybe we can't do anything about it this year. I don't know. I'm not saying we can, but we have to really, I think about the budget from, completely zero, whatever it's called.
Spiro, did you have?
There's some term. I mean.
There's a question for those of you who have been attending more regularly than I have. Has there been any serious discussion about including wastewater in the mission into the mission of the county going forward? And if so, that's where the additional revenue conversation really should kick in.
Yes, that has, but we've had a little problem when Andrew Gottlieb made an initial report and definitely took a very mission-oriented position, which was, we've got this tremendous opportunity, and there's just no question it should be done from a regional point of view for all sorts of reasons, financial and ecological. But and so we've been planning to deal with that topic in discussion, but it's been put off several times because he couldn't come back. And then there was the scheduling and the posting issue, which has now happened twice. So that's why that discussion hasn't happened. But yes, it's definitely the big, topic out there that keeps getting referred to, but because he hasn't been back yet, hasn't been dealt with that much.
The one thing that is becoming apparent, and this has been the sort of sitting out there without being resolved now since this commission was formed, is where's it going? Who's it going to? They report to the commissioners, all right? Now, if it includes changes that have to go through a charter change, and it's increasingly looking like it won't simply because of the time frame, but if it did, let's say they wanted to change the structure of this body or the county commissioners, right? That has to go to the ballot. If it goes to the ballot, that means that the voter walking into the booth will say, I'm going to vote for an assembly delegate, assuming I have an assembly delegate. If in other words, the legislation to change how we're structured would be on the same ballot as the actual voting, which would make it almost impossible to. I mean, how could you vote for a county commissioner and say, well, I'm going to vote for an assembly delegate. I'm also going to vote for a regional delegate because I don't know how this question is going to answer. So I think from a very practical standpoint, as we go along, it's already January, we're going to have another meeting in February, that it becomes increasingly unlikely that we're going to make any significant changes to the structure of county government that are going to be effective immediately.
I would tend to agree to that because I don't know what the group is going to come up with, but it's not going to be the existing 3 commissioner structure if they're going to make a big change. And I just think, yeah, in some ways, I don't think there's anybody at the moment on the commission with an appetite for doing all of the work that would be required to make that kind of change. I don't think Henri and Rob see that as necessary for them. And so, yes, this commission report is going to the commissioners, and then it is up to them to implement it. And I would be surprised if they would immediately start in on revamping the structure. Now, I think Sheila would, but I don't think, she's already told us that, but I don't think Pat or Bill are oriented that way. And
well, I'll tell you this much: if they intend to come to this body to go through the normal process of amending the charter, I'm going to tell them it's too late because we have a budget in front of us, and that kind of a discussion could eat up enormous amount of time, and here would be deliberating over our own fate. So from a practical standpoint, I don't think that the normal avenue of changing a charter is open to them. If they have some other magic in their pocket going directly to the legislature, I'm not aware of it. And I don't think that decision has been made. I don't know who they is. I mean, they is us, and we haven't really come up with anything. So the future is uncertain. Yes, Leo.
The last time we had a charter change, the date of June 2nd rings in my head. So, to have anyone come forward with any type of charter change, we have to have the language prepared and ready for the ballot prior to the first week of June. It's just not going to happen this year. Even if the committee suggests it, the time's just not there. Now, whether the commissioners decide to take it on for a next fall's discussion, but remember, they have a deadline, and that deadline, again, is the first week of June if they want to bring something onto the ballot.
Okay, I guess we'll move on then to, unless anybody has anything to say, to Special Committee on Inquiry into CLC and CVEC, CVEC. We met today. We'd asked for some information. I don't know if, Leo, you want to give that? I hate to give a report from here. I'd rather have somebody else do it.
No, we met today. It was a committee hearing, a committee meeting, I should say. There were people from the public there. They did not give any comments or testimony. The committee basically just reviewed some issues that each one of us have, I don't want to say uncovered, because that means that they were somehow being covered, but some issues that we had questions about. We are in fact going to hold and I'm going to use the term public hearing, although there is no legal decision being made out of it, so it's really not a public hearing, but it's going to be a meeting in which the public will be able to come and address us with their comments. Those comments are going to have to be pretty much focused onto why the committee was assembled, and we're going to use the language right out of the resolution, giving that to the public so they'll know why or what they'll be able to stand up at the mic and comment on. As far as our work being done, there are a lot of questions that have been asked. We did, subsequently after our last meeting, request some executive committee minutes. It has come to our attention that there are no executive committee minutes for CVEC. CLC had, I believe, 4 that we requested, and they had sent us a letter saying that those 4, I think they sent us 1 copy of one and said the other were executive session, so they were not released to us. The discussion amongst the subcommittee was that it's a little disconcerting that there is no, or doesn't seem to be any records of motions and votes taken on the basic day-to-day operations of both of these organizations. No decision has come out. We did discuss very openly on where we're headed from here. I think I can safely say that there will be a report given to the entire assembly. You probably won't see it for another couple of months, only because we are now entering the budget season, and we are going to be looking at some conflicting dates and when we will be able to meet again. I think it'd be safe to report to you that we will at least meet 2 more times and probably 3. There was a discussion about when the draft report, thank you, is done, that we will give that draft report to CVEC and CLC and ask them to come in and respond to some of the more specific situations that may be listed or may not be listed in that report, and then we'll bring it back to the full assembly. Again, I can't really, we didn't take any votes, we didn't take any motions or movement. It was just basically a good 2 hours of discussion.
Jim, do you have anything to add to that, or John, or anybody? You're good? Yeah. How about Deborah? Anything to add to that?
I thought it was a real fair summary.
Yeah. I think one of the things, I think we're moving in the direction of looking forward rather than backwards. I don't know what Leo thinks about this, but basically, whatever procedures they had in the past are done with. We're looking at recommending procedures going forward. I brought up the similarity to the IG's report on Smart Cape, which of course isn't in operation now, but they said going forward we think we should, things like that. So whether or not they should or should not have kept minutes and so on, nothing we can do about that, but going forward we might make some recommendations. We also feel that a lot of the financials, I mean, you're dealing with millions of dollars, are beyond our capacity to look into. I mean, so that we might ask for an audit at some point if they haven't gone through an audit. Apparently they haven't gone through one. We go through one. The towns go through one. So independent audit might be something that can clear up a lot of the accusations and back and forth and so on. If you had an independent body looking into something, we just had an independent body looking into the wastewater, the model in the wastewater, and they came out last week. I pointed up and they said it's good. You know, so there's an answer. Same thing with the wind turbine thing. We had somebody looked into that, and they did a study, and they said, so we're looking to go beyond the scope of the committee, or we may look to go beyond the scope of the committee and take in some people who could resolve some of the underlying issues. But I think the only reason it's taken this long is just the nature of the beast. We're going to have another meeting for public comment. Then if we do make recommendations, we have to make those in public session. We can't just make them on our own. And then, as Leo says, we don't feel it's fair to go to the Assembly with those recommendations without sitting down with CVEC and CLC and asking them, what they think, if they agree, don't agree, if they had anything to add. So that's why we're looking at going forward. There's no time constraint, although I don't want, a lot of people seem to think this is hanging over their head like the sword of Damocles, so I don't want that to go on too long. But so far, we haven't laid a scratch on anybody, so I'm not worried about it. So, okay. Anything further on that? Sure.
If you don't mind, I'm sure you'll address this in your report to us, but I'm afraid the report will be so long, it may be easier to just ask now. I was wondering if you could address what you just referred to as an executive committee within CVEC. I did visit their website. It explained the membership of CVEC, but I don't recall it addressing an executive committee. So I'm wondering, at least in the course of your meetings, did you, no, I'm not talking about an executive session of the group. I'm talking about an executive committee. And I'm very intrigued by it because apparently we have the same thing with our nonprofit up in Provincetown with our monument. And I don't know if you caught all that, but that has engaged the controversy of our town. And the relationship between the executive committee and the full board is at the heart of it all and how that happens. So my question to you is, could you at least tell us how many folks are on the executive committee of CVEC, did you find out? And does the town become the member of the executive committee, or is it a person, so that when that person, say, resigns from CVEC, maybe they put on a new person? What did you find out about the...
Leo is the expert on executive committees.
We were given a copy of both the organization's bylaws. In both the organization's bylaws, they refer to a board of directors, and then they refer to an executive committee. In both cases, pretty much because they were startup organizations, they started with 3 members, and those 3 members were labeled the executive committee. As towns joined on, the towns sent a representative to the board meetings, and that person became a board member. The executive committees consist of 5 members. The original 3 voted when the next person came on, that person be on the executive committee, and then subsequently the 4th person. Then as it grew and the years went on, there are actually votes taken at an annual meeting, which I believe is sometime in September, if I remember correctly. And the votes are taken by the full board. The board, again, is made up of the representatives from the towns to these positions of the executive committee. The executive committee in the bylaws has a great deal of authority, far more authority than, and I'll just throw a personal note in there that I'm certainly comfortable with, but their organizations seem to be happy with that authority, and that's how they operate. The executive committees do have the authority to buy, sell, rent, lease, transfer, and basically run the operation without having to rely on the full board of directors' vote. So that's why when we originally requested the general session minutes and noticed that there was lacking some direction on how these organizations were moving forward, that we thought it would be prudent to ask for the executive committee minutes, because those are the ones in which actually the authority lies. So I hope that answered your question.
Halfway, Leo, thank you. It didn't tell me who's on it right now. I assume you've got 5 folks. And then the second question would be then, there's nothing in the bylaws right now that requires the executive committee to ratify their votes at a full board meeting?
I didn't see that.
Because even the monument had that.
Yeah, I didn't see that language, and that it requires the full board to ratify the executive committee's decision. I did, but it doesn't say that it's not there, but that doesn't ring a bell with me.
Okay, so can you tell us who the executive committee is now?
I can if you want me to go back and look. I don't remember the names off the top of my head.
let us know
It's
later.
it's further complicated by the fact that normally, I'm sure you're familiar with the reasons to go into executive session. They're specified, why, and you have to say, we're going into executive. I know it's a different thing, but there's also further reasons why they can go into executive session and not even release as what's called proprietary information. So not only is this board limited, it has a lot of authority and it's limited in its membership, but it's also limited in what it has to disclose, which may or may not be necessary, I don't know, but it's something that has been a bone of contention, and something we've looked at and need further explanation, I guess, as to how much people are entitled to know and how much they're not entitled to know. So, anyway, is there anything more on that? We'll have another meeting on the 1st. Will be taken up, I imagine, exclusively by comments from the public. Most of the comments that we've gotten so far by mail have had to do with what a great organization these, what fine work they do, none of which we disagree with. We're hoping we can get comments on the specifics of what we're looking for, which is pretty much the organizational structure of these groups and how they do business, almost similar to what we're doing up at the county. We're looking at how they work and how they could be improved. So I did that at 2 o'clock today. So, all right, do we have a report from the clerk?
Yes. Technically, the report from the clerk is very brief, but I'm very anxious to get into the next item of the budget, which talks about scheduling for budget review. But as far as the clerk's report goes, I just want to make sure that everyone does check the folders today before you leave, because there is some important information in there for you individually. And other than that, I guess I will wait for the next item on the agenda when we talk about budget scheduling.
Okay, moving right along. We didn't get a lot of information from the county commissioners today, but some of you attended the meeting, so you know pretty much. Maybe you can give us a report on what they've said. But we know that there's a budget deficit. Mary Pat Flynn told us last week and told me specifically that they would be making changes. They didn't say what they would be. There's two issues. First of all, the first and most immediate issue is scheduling our review of the budget. And the reason I've kept pushing the commissioners on what they're doing is not because I'm curious, it's because unless they have determined what they're going to do with this year's budget, do they have a basis for creating another budget? So I'm worried this is going to push us back further, but we're going to go ahead assuming that they're going to produce this post haste, and we're going to look at it in the time frame that's set out. So, I'll open it up to the committee. What do you think, Leo?
Because the budget is basically made up of all the different departments, and I can only send this out for discussion purposes, is it a possibility that we can get the departments that they've already worked on and subsequently approved, so we can at least move forward somewhere, as opposed to waiting for the whole package?
I asked them for that information, and what did they say, Janice?
They haven't approved.
No, they haven't, but they've gotten a presentation. I was looking for the proposed budget from each individual department, and I remember them responding in a way that it was not satisfactory.
Well, the indication that I received, or the response I got, was whatever we would get now would not be complete, because they don't have retirement figures yet, they don't have wage figures, they don't have health insurance information yet, so they're waiting for those pieces to put it all together to roll it out to us in one package. And I think you'll see shortly that what I'm proposing is, we are going to get started sooner versus later. Once we get the budget from them, which isn't that far away now, it's February 15th, which is certainly earlier than you received it last year. And based on what I'm proposing, we, jump right in and get started February 29th with the budget reviews. And there are a lot of reasons why I'm proposing that type of schedule. Can I continue? Yes?
Yes, go ahead.
All right.
You're on a roll.
Okay. I had some communication with standing committee chairs, and respectfully wanted them to weigh in on when we should start, what days we can meet on, time, sequence, and I received some feedback, and where I didn't receive feedback, I presumed that if you hear nothing, that's a good sign. So that's what I presumed, and I went ahead and I started to develop a schedule. I'm proposing that we start February 29th. I think I emailed that to everyone because it affects everyone differently. Some people I'm asking on standing committees to come to meet with their committee and departments on a week when the Assembly doesn't meet. And other times, we will be having committee meetings when the Assembly meets. But there's no easy way to digest it. When you've got this number of departments to roll through, there's a beginning and an end point, and if we put it off too long, you're going to be in the same situation you were last year, not knowing what's going to happen with other budgets or things that might come along. It'd be nice to be in a position come April to have a little bit of wiggle room, so that if something else were to happen, we'd have the ability to address that. Now, keep in mind that as we're doing this and we're reviewing department schedules, there are other things potentially that can happen. Other ordinances, proposed ordinances come through. So you'll see on the schedule where, you know, if it appears that a committee meeting is ending at 3 or 3:15, and gee, why if the Assembly meeting starts at 4? Because I'm trying to build in a little wiggle room there, just in case we get a proposed ordinance or somebody shows up late, et cetera, et cetera. So with that being said, I want to make sure that before I go ahead and release this information to staff who are very anxiously wondering, okay, when do I have to meet, so that we get the right people in here at the right time, that we're all okay with what I'm proposing. And unfortunately, somebody's got to be first, someone's going to be last, and I'm still waiting to hear from one standing committee chair to make sure that that week will work for them. It looks like I'm proposing we start on February 29th and keep going consecutively until we finish with department reviews March 21st. Now, on the 28th, after that, it's all tentative. Last year, we ran into a situation with one standing committee where they could not conclude at the end of their meeting or make their recommendations. And that's something else that I'm going to strongly urge you to do or attempt to do when you've got that committee meeting and you review the budget, you've got all the tools, make a decision. Because if you don't and you have to come back at a later point in time, you may not have all the same people there. So it becomes even more complicated.
Those of you who've been around for a while know that Diane struggled with this year after year, trying to get everybody together, finding time frames, trying to slot in, you know, stray ordinances that would wander in from hither and yon. So I hope you be as cooperative as possible with Janice and try to, you know, set your schedule accordingly. Now, Janice, there's a reason why you're skipping the 22nd? You don't want to start right away? You think that's too soon?
It's too soon. Once we get the budget on the 15th, I want to, like, prepare my notice, and I just want to make sure that, you know, we've got everything done that I need to have done, and I really need that little bit of extra time.
John, what do you see the Finance Committee doing here? I mean, I know that you meet ultimately with the chairs, and then you ultimately make a recommendation, but do you have a previous meeting to that? I mean,
I haven't really discussed it, so I'm wide open. I'm here.
Okay, because I really think you should get the recommendation from the chairs before you put out a separate budget. So we don't have to reconcile our own budget before we reconcile.
So something post March 21st is what you're suggesting?
Yeah, Spiro?
I think we all got a draft of the schedule to meet with department heads. I'm sure we'll be able to work that out, but I think this year's budget is going to play out a little differently. I don't think it's the budgets of the departments that are going to determine what this budget looks like. It's going to be the revenue numbers that we can hopefully come to some consensus on before they start fashioning the budget. The commissioners met last week to discuss those revenue numbers, and I would attribute it mostly to Mary Pat Flynn's insistence that they be based in reality this year, that they're going to come in such a way that they're going to be telling, the commissioners will be telling the department heads what their budgets are going to look like. I don't want to jump ahead if you want to still talk about scheduling department heads.
Well, okay, I just had to add something to what you just said. As Mary Pat told me, and I think John at the last meeting, at the county governance meeting, when we questioned her on this, she said that she did not anticipate having to cover the deficit from reserves. Am I right on that, John? She said they did not expect substantial, she was going to try to organize it this year, that they would not tap into reserves to cover the deficit. So we'll see if they hold to that commitment.
I don't think you're going to get a correct answer. I think there's going to be an answer. This year, we will have spent $24.5 million, and we will have taken in $23 million. We had some money in the checkbook before we started the year, and that's how they're going to cover the difference. But what I wanted to give you was maybe some quick crib notes going forward, just to give you an idea of what the commissioners are working on. I don't want to step on John for doing this, but there's really only 6 numbers we have to keep in mind going forward, and these are the numbers that are coming out of the Registry of Deeds. In 2011, they collected $6 million in excise tax. In 2012, we will have collected $6.5 million in excise tax. The problem is that the commissioners were banking on $7.5 million. So there's $1 million shortfall there. In the proposed 2013 budget, they're planning on $7 million. So they're inching back towards a more realistic number. But after Jack's discussion with them this morning, I understand that he doesn't think we're going to get to that $7 million number either. The other piece of business that Jack does for the county in collecting fees at the registry, in 2011, they collected $2.7 million. In 2012, they collected $2.7 million. The problem, we will have collected 2.7. The problem with that number is we budgeted $3.2 million. So the other $500,000 shortfall comes from that number. And in 2013, the commissioners are proposing to, or anticipating to receive $3 million from that revenue stream. That's still $300,000 more than this year, combined with the $500,000 more in the excise tax. They still think the registry is going to come in at $800,000 more than they did this year, even after Jack told them not to plan on that. That's the nature of the problem we're going to have when we start to look at these budgets, either in its entirety or department by department. Are they going to be basing that the revenue numbers or the money we have available to spend on these high projections? And no matter how much work we do with these department heads when they come in here to have them justify their individual budgets, it's really the sum total. Can we come up with a number that we can agree with the commissioners that we have available to spend next year? Again, I think Mary Pat's making an attempt to create a realistic number. She's going to try to come in at $23.5 million this year. But she was given a number of $7 million from ostensibly the director of finance, who's the county administrator right now, of $7 million for excise tax, which does not approach the trend line. And I don't know if you guys remember that discussion, but the county administrator is big on trend lines. I think this year we're going to go over, we're going to beat our trend line with our excise tax. It's just not likely to happen. So again, we're going to find ourselves in this weird position of passing a budget that we think is out of balance, but the commissioners say is in balance.
But I guess what I'm trying to get at is that if they're not going to go into reserves for this year, then the only alternative to me is that they're going to cut positions so that the budget that they're going to base next year's budget on is actually going to be lower than what this budget is. In other words, they're not going to base next year's budget on the budget we got last year. They're going to base it on the budget we got last year minus the layoffs and so on and so forth. Now, I don't know what, you say that they're going to try to use money left over from last year. There's 2 kinds of money left over from last year. One is, geez, we got more money in than we thought, so we got a surplus. The other is money that's appropriated but not expended. In other words, the light bill hasn't come for December hasn't come in yet, and that's normally what's left over, money that we've spent but we haven't paid. And so we can't use that because if we use that, then we're going to have twice as much left over at the end of next year. You understand how it works?
I'm trying to give as layman an explanation as I could come up with to get people to sort of understand
You say layman
how
or
we
lame?
get laymen. This is how we got to where we are. We started the year out with money in our checkbook. We added 23 million to it.
Every year.
And by the way, this goes back 3 years because we've spent $1 million more in each of the last 3 fiscal years than we took in. So that money had to be sitting in the checking account for us to be able to do that. We just have not been able to get a straight answer from the county administrator or the commissioners of how those funds materialize so that they'll be spent, or how are they being held in our possession without there being obvious, I suppose, to the rest of us.
Yeah. First, Paul, we haven't heard from you yet. So.
I'm harking back to the budget process 3 years ago, because and at that time, we went through and we met with all the departments, and the departments presented us with wonderful rationales and explanations for why they needed this money in the budget. And as committees, we generally went along and approved those budgets. And then we ran up against the reality, and the Finance Committee came in and had to make, cuts that were really across the board. And so I guess I'm hearing that we may be running into that same situation again, that we're going to go and meet with our committee, as committees with the department heads, and they're going to again present us with wonderful rationales, and we're going to say, yes, that's terrific, and we should support you and vote those out, and then we're going to run up against reality in April. So my suggestion, request, I don't know if this would be possible, would be if we were able to have some kind of structure to the committee meetings where we either decided ahead of time that we really should be looking at a 10% cut in department budgets, and that's the sort of the gold standard that we should use, or whether we should be coming up with a couple of alternative recommendations depending on what the revenue projections are. But I agree with Spiro that it's the revenues that are going to drive this budget, and we're going to be facing that situation come April and May if we don't face it beforehand.
I want to comment on that because the commissioner should make that decision. If they're going to make cuts in next year's budget, then they should come up with that. The alternative is that they put in revenue sources like, let's say, reserves that the Assembly, especially the Finance Committee, doesn't agree with. So really, the committee chairs have to deal with the Finance Committee. The Finance Committee says, hey, they're taking $500,000 out of reserves, and we're not going to approve that. We're not going to recommend approve that, so we recommend that you not build that into your budget. Then that kind of communication will go ahead. But we won't know that until we get the actual budget from the commissioners, how they plan to cover it. Yeah.
If I could just follow up for a second, but if we could know that before we started our committee meetings, it would indeed be very helpful.
That's what I mean, yeah.
That's
Cheryl?
Mr. Speaker, you gave us a small, quick crash course on county budgeting, and you said in terms of monies that might be available at the end of the year to cover a shortfall, and you said there were two kinds. One was the surplus.
Right.
I've never had the pleasure of sitting here when you had one, but I saw it on TV. And the second was, say, an unpaid bill, an electric bill that's going to come due.
There's a lot of unpaid bills.
I guess I would challenge you back and say I know there's another kind, which is I said at the beginning of the year I was going to buy 3 police cars, and I knew the money was running out, so I didn't buy 3 of them. I bought 2. I don't know what they call that in municipal finance, but I know it was done in Provincetown a lot. And at one point, we caught on to it. And so...
You called it free cash in Chatham.
No, it's not free cash. It's encumbered funds that haven't been spent, and there's not necessarily a bill attached because you just changed your mind about spending it. And so what we started to do was go back at the end of the year and look at every single article that was in front of the town meeting where we gave permission to the town manager to spend money. And we said, okay, of that, how much didn't get spent? It's not free cash, and it's certainly not surplus, and it's not an unpaid bill. I don't remember the phrase for it, I think, but there was an amazing amount of money in there, and usually what ended up happening was it got brought back before town meeting during special town meeting as transfer money, and it got pushed around to pay the bills. I've been here long enough to see certain amounts of money put aside for anticipated bills. Some of those bills may have come in. I'm sure some of them didn't. Even the IT budget itself was huge last year. I don't know whether all that software that they wanted to buy, whether they bought it or not. So, like I said, I forget from my finance days, it's been about 4 years what we call that. Maybe some of you that have served on it can tell me, but that's the information that I think
I'll tell you
would
what
be nice if we
what
got.
little I know is that this, and goes back to Spiro's question, where are they getting money to pay these bills? If you read the audit, you'll see that we have cash. In other words, we have money in reserves, a lot of money compared to a similar organization as ours. So we have a lot of money in reserves. When I first started here, Mark told me it was encumbered. In other words, it was set aside for specific purposes. We couldn't use it for other purposes. Then, so all of a sudden, the magic wand was waved, and we did use some. But some of it is encumbered. And for instance, Sheila today talked about the money for the lab. That money was set aside specifically capital purposes for lab. So even though it's set in reserve, you have to look for it. Then there's insurance reserves, there's legal reserves. So the whole reserve thing, if you want to be the one to look into it and explain it, I'll appoint you right now.
Let me be real clear. I am not talking about reserves.
Well,
I am talking about encumbered funds for specific purposes, like a health lab, that for whatever reason you just haven't, you've decided this year.
I used the word reserves in a general sense. But
Well,
there's money that's there.
that's
It's
different,
not used
though.
for operational expenses. It's encumbered. Yes, Leo.
Poor Janice is hung out there, so I think I'm going to have to at least chime in and say, I agree with your way that you're scheduling the thing, because I don't think we've actually finished that discussion. So first of all, I think that's great. I agree we should start right away. One thing I would like to see somewheres in the scheduling, maybe at the beginning would be better, but I don't think it's going to be good timing, so possibly at the end, is I think we should really have the gentleman from the Registry of Deeds come in and speak to us directly. Last year it came down to a decision when we were voting on our budget, or the budget I should say. Some of us made some pretty deep cuts. Some of us did not believe in the revenue stream that was projected. The majority of us did believe in that revenue stream and did vote the budget. A lot of it was based on Mark coming here and saying that, you know, people had history with him and people certainly had faith in his projections. I think it's time that the rubber's hitting the road, and I think we need to hear it right from the horse's mouth, as it were, and I think it would benefit us if we could get Mr. Mead in here and find out what his feelings are. The other revenue streams that we base our budget on is really not too much for us to investigate. I mean, it's pretty much crunching the numbers. The other thing is, as far as our committee meetings go, I think it's important for us to have them. I think it's important for us to have a one-on-one with the department heads. I think at those meetings, if the motion is made to, bring forth their budget as presented, that's fine. But at some point, if we discover that the revenues aren't there, we would have had the opportunity to take it upon ourselves, as I did last year, and go back and review those budgets that I subsequently voted to pass because I was under the impression we had the revenues, but I felt comfortable, although I know it wasn't popular, to target certain areas of that budget that I knew through asking the department head, hey, listen, if we need to cut 10% out of this, where should I take it from? So I wasn't blindly going through and just making cuts. We may not have to take the vote after every meeting to do that, but I think it's a good question for us to ask, and I certainly intend on asking it when I'm sitting at my subcommittee hearings. I want their input on if I have to make a cut in the future, where's the best place to make it from. The only other thing I would like to add is, last year when I brought forth my budget, I was really concerned of the fact that by the time reality struck, certain expenditures would have already been made. And I find that even more disheartening as we continue to wait to go back and revisit the 12 budget. Because, as was mentioned by some of our members, that there are certain allocations in the budget which aren't spent on July 1st. I mean, those allocations are spent throughout the year. My concern is, as the longer we wait, that bank, if you will, or pool of expenditures continues to get smaller because the checks continue to go out daily. And unfortunately, I hate to see us have to cut positions because that's the last thing that's left. But those are just comments.
All right, Chris?
Yeah, it's exactly what I was going to say about the committees that we ought to be asking as we go. If we had to take 7%, 10%, whatever that figure is, whatever 1.5 is as a percentage of 24, we should be doing that as we go, just in case we do reach that point. The other question I had is we have asked, I don't know, I didn't receive it, if anybody received the year-end revenues as compared to the budgeted revenues of the county. Has anybody received those? Do I need to ask for them as a public document from the county administration? Or
the end of last fiscal year?
The budgeted revenues for this fiscal year,
right,
as of December 31st versus what was actually received.
Yeah, we do have. They
okay.
do have that.
We got a hard copy from the commissioners last week. I think if we can get an electronic copy to Janice, then everyone can have one.
Great.
You don't want mine. You can't read it anymore.
It's not pretty.
Mr. Speaker?
Julia? Yeah, sorry.
I do think that while I want us to proceed with the committee hearings, as Janice is setting it up, I think it would be useful for the Finance Committee to meet immediately once they get the budget, as soon as they can, and at least come up with a few thoughts that most of them agree on. Not to say that everybody else would agree, but it would be useful to have those
revenue
thoughts and therefore spending thoughts. Yeah, just any conclusions you reach from looking at the budget, just quickly, would be useful to have a brief discussion at the Assembly before we start on the committee hearings. At least to have us be oriented to where the Finance Committee is oriented.
Well, hopefully we'll have that by the 15th of February, and by that time, hopefully the commissioners will have presented us with a baseline of this year, exactly what our expenditures are going to be in fiscal year 12. And I assume that their budget is going to be based on the amended expenditures. I don't know. It depends on the revenue projections. So we'll get any information that we get in the office, we're going to send out to the Assembly members as quickly as possible so you can look at it. So are we all set here?
So we're okay with starting on the 29th? I mean, pretty much it's Paul and Julie are gonna, start it off, so, okay. I'll send you an updated schedule once I send this out to departments.
Okay, I know I had something else, but I totally forgot what it was, so it couldn't be that. Oh, I know what it is. We have an ordinance in front of us that Sheila submitted to us on behalf of the commissioners, and we're going to have a public hearing on that.
Could we hear what the ordinance is?
Oh, yes.
Can we hear what the ordinance is, please?
She didn't describe it. Yeah. It's a I'll read it here. It says, to add to the county's operating budget, fiscal year 2012 is enacted an ordinance numbered 11-06 by making supplemental appropriations for the fiscal year 2012 based on a revised estimate of income of Barnstable County for the current fiscal year made as of January 8th, the sum set forth in Section 1 for the several purposes set forth therein and subject to conditions set forth, so on and so forth. Basically, it's county services. They want to take $600,000 and put it in of the building conversion, and then make a $600,000 appropriation from, I assume, the account set up for capital expenditures, and they're going to spend it. Put it right toward the.
It's money they have in a reserve. I think it's in a reserve.
John, does that make sense to help?
Well, I haven't seen it yet, but.
Why is that coming in under operating expenses?
They want to change it over from the reserve to spend it on.
Yeah, but you would bypass operating expenses if it was purely capital improvements. Why are we sticking it in the,
It says the operating budget.
yeah, that's the part I heard. Why is it going
Well,
through
the
the budget?
Said funds shall be derived from the capital improvement reserve, and it's to, I guess, continue their progress with the health lab.
Yeah, I'll save my questions for the public hearing.
One presumes, at least in our organization, when you have a reserve for a certain purpose, and you dip into that reserve for that purpose, that it's considered, you have to make an ordinance. Anyway, moving right along. Is there anything else?
So Speaker, can I
Yes.
request that, well, it's your discretion. I'd love to talk about the MMA report, consultant's report, which is relevant to budget discussions. It's something that the commissioners should be looking at as they're devising their budget. There's some very keen recommendations in there that affect the development of the budget, primarily around the personnel of county administrator and finance director. And not coincidentally, depending on how they address that question, it has an impact on CVEC and CLC, which is another issue we're having. So
Yeah.
if we,
That was a topic that came up
Yes.
when we, at the commission meeting, the county commission meeting, and they said that they had put off discussing that and dealing with it until they got the commission report, because they thought they went together.
Special committee?
The special commission
Yeah.
report, yeah. So that's what they said. They had not, they had had some discussion of it, but they were putting off any further work on it until they had the new, this report.
I would suggest that we put that as an agenda item next
Yes.
meeting, because
They thought it went together, and they
Yeah.
wanted to hear the first. Now, that's not to say that's the best way to do it, but that is their reason for not having proceeded with that.
anyway.
well, again, they're punting. They don't want to address the separation of the county administrator's job into two people and bring Maggie back to be the other person. So it's not going to show up in the budget unless they have a conversation.
Well, what I'm saying is that we might want to have to refamiliarize ourselves with that report before we discuss it, so.
I'm just saying it's timely because they're taking up the county commissioner's budget next Wednesday. We're not going to be meeting next Wednesday. We're going to be meeting in 2 weeks. So subsequent to that meeting would be really the only chance to talk about MMA. After that, the opportunity's gone and the budget's here. So if I mean, at your discretion, if you want to make an agenda item, we can have the conversation. If not,
Yeah, I'd rather, I mean,
be going.
since Julie's got her coat on already, and also, I don't remember what's in that report. I couldn't really discuss it right now.
no, I'm not talking about right now. I'm just saying,
Oh, no, yeah.
put it on the agenda
That's
for
what I'm
2
gonna
weeks
do.
from now.
Yes.
And then we'll be prepared to have that discussion. Thank you.
Okay. Is there anything else?
Well,
John?
Mr. Speaker, I just want to make sure that we are going to schedule a public hearing for February
Yes.
1st
At 3 o'clock.
at 3 o'clock.
Yes.
Is that okay with my board? Good. We hadn't said, we are,
The ordinance is 3 o'clock.
to coincide with the fact that we're meeting from 1 to 3 on CVAC.
You think you can need an hour on that, John?
I do, actually. I think this is one that, this is the first curveball I'm seeing from the administration.
Take care of that.
And I'd like to fully vet it, and I hope that they come with both guns blazing.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Oh.